His topic today is most apropos for our times, putting faces on world problems. Please welcome Father Stephen Sundborg.
I told Stan I'd like to see him up here with a Seattle U Red Hawk. We have the same color red. It would work just right. That bit about Joe Biden cannot be able to put two and two together was a sneaky one there, Bo, too. I will always be grateful that over the course of my 14 years as president of a university at the heart of Seattle and pressing on towards what I hope will be 20 years, that I've had the privilege and the warmth of colleagueship in this Rotary Club. I'm honored to be called on at times to be your priest and your prayer leader. You've given me access to the best podium, the best pulpit, the best platform in our city, and I've spoken about moral leadership, about interreligious dialogue, and about young people as the can-do generation. In this, I hope I have been able to bring my world to you. But this club's colleagueship has also brought to me every week its world whenever my crazy presidential schedule has allowed me to be here. The real world comes to Rotary 4 every week in our speakers and probably more importantly, in ourselves. We are expanded people because of this, and we are deepened people. The world comes rushing at us week after week, and we are called to respond certainly from service above self, but also service from what is deepest within ourselves. My theme today is not one which I chose, but one which chose me. I call it Putting Faces on World Problems. Putting Faces on World Problems. We're surrounded by world problems that are long-lasting, seemingly insoluble, often impossible even to understand. We don't choose them, we live with them, and we live within them. We can't seem to get a hold on them so that we can respond. They seem to be beyond us: war, poverty, ecological degradation, terror, an interlocking world economy that reaches all the way into our lives and into our homes, the education of new generations of young people, an overwhelming, rushing technology and how it impacts our humanity. One world, and we one part of it, and it a very big part of us. Today I want to put a face on 3 world issues. My belief is that putting a face on them makes them less mega, humanizes them, allows us to enter into them not with mind alone but with heart, and to follow where the heart leads us. I didn't choose these issues. They walked in the door of my president's office at Seattle U. They looked on me, they smiled, they spoke, they asked for something, they moved me. And I'm eager for you too to see these faces and meet 3 students who are the faces of 3 of the world's pressing issues. I suppose you could call the first issue the Palestinian problem, but it is more than that. It came to me and took on a face in a student named Khaled. Khaled has a rounded, wide-smiling, olive face with eyes that show suffering and compassion. Khaled laughs easily, often, fully. He's from that part of Bethlehem that is called Beth Saur. He's a Christian Palestinian, a Catholic Palestinian. On his mother's side, and this is a little hard to believe, they claim that they can trace their family back in Bethlehem all the way to the time of King David. So the family was there in Bethlehem when Jesus of Nazareth was born. In Khaled, the Palestinian people of Bethlehem walked in my door. Now, Khaled is missing his right arm. When he was 13, in the midst of an intifada, when all the schools were closed, he was helping out in a relative's bakery. An eggshell fell into the dough of a special sweet that he was mixing in a machine, Khaled reached in to get the shell, got his hand caught and his arm mangled and nearly ripped off before he went into a coma. Only because of local Palestinian doctors who called Jewish doctors was he able to be transported to the famous Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem, where his life was saved and his arm amputated. Now, because he was amputated, he was able, once schools opened, to stay in school while all of his 5 brothers and sisters had to work. He received nose therapy for 6 years until some nuns in Bethlehem took compassion on him. And one day, one of them suggested that this listless 19-year-old Khaled visit a small school that they ran for traumatized children. Khaled went there, and when he entered, there was a little girl who scooted away underneath the table and would not come out. She was a traumatized girl, traumatized by war, by death of relatives, by violence, by family rage that is often taken out in abuse of children. But big Khaled, and he is big, he just got down, he crawled under the table, he talked with her, he played with her, and after a while he was able to lead her out into the light. And he discovered in himself an unknown and an unusual gift of compassion, and he dedicated his life from that moment that he would give it for helping traumatized children, that he would use dance and music and play and storytelling and even shouting to unlock and release the trauma within children and to begin some healing. He is a healer from Bethlehem, and that phrase rings a bell for me. Now, friends brought him to Seattle so that he could get help for his prosthesis, for education and how to work with traumatized children, and eventually he got to Seattle U for not only a bachelor's in social work, but a master's in not-for-profit leadership. And he's now founded, with the help of dozens of professors and students, for no one can say no to big, one-armed, laughing, suffering-eyed Khaled, and neither can I. He's founded the Children of Peace Foundation to build and run a new school in Bethlehem for all traumatized children there, whether Jewish or Christian or Muslim. He's calling it the Gabriel Project because the angel Gabriel appeared to the prophet Daniel, to Mary of Nazareth, and to the prophet Muhammad. Trauma knows not the boundaries of religion. The face of Khaled is now, for me, the face of the Holy Land that is holy to all 3 religions. It's the face of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and struggle for peace, the place at the center and origin of what so many of us believe and live by. In fact, Khaled's face so moves me that it has replaced the face of Jesus as we have come to understand what he looks like in our Western tradition. His face became the face of Jesus for me, both the smile and the suffering, but above all, the compassion. Now, putting Khaled's face on the Palestinian problem doesn't solve it, but it humanizes it. It allows me as a person to enter into it. It helps me to be one with it. It helps me to learn about it and pay attention to it, to respond to it from my position of influence and from my place of hope and of prayer. In fellowship with you as Rotarians and compassionate colleagues of mine, I get to introduce Khaled and his world and bring that world to you and put a face on it for you. When Khaled looks on us, how does service above self and service from what is deep within ourselves make us unable to say anything other than yes and to follow where that yes leads? Come along with me now, again to my office, because I'm eager for you to meet another Seattle University student who puts a face on a different world issue. Meet Anthony. While Khaled was the face of the Palestinian, Anthony is the face of Africa. Anthony's face is deep black. It's shiny, with a scar that runs all the way down one side from forehead to cheek, and he has flitting, bloodshot eyes. Anthony laughs too, he smiles, he kids, but he's more worn and he's more serious than Khaled is. His is the face of the Africa we hear about and think we know in its violence, its poverty, its sickness. But his is also the face of Africa the resilient, Africa the welcoming, Africa the warm, Africa the hopeful, and Africa with something to teach us about ourselves. Now, Anthony came into my office because friends, Killian No of Recovery Cafe and Greg Alex of Matt Talbot Center, picked him up off the streets of Seattle, got him sobered and recovering from alcohol, saw bright promise in his mind and his heart and his desire for education and in his Catholic faith. Could I help get him a university education? When I heard Anthony's story and I looked on his face, saw Africa looking at me in its worst and in its best, and looked in those eyes, I could only say yes. I took him to a big-hearted donor that I have the privilege of knowing, Jim Sinegal of Costco, who also, after making sure that Anthony was for real and looked in his eyes and saw that he would go back and help his people, Jim said yes to Anthony 1 quarter at a time for tuition, room, and board. Anthony had to prove himself, and he has. Here's his story. Anthony's from southern Sudan. He's now 41, and he is an undergraduate senior. He's had a very long story. Anthony is one of 13 children of his mother, who is one of 7 wives of his father. And so he is one of 51 brothers and sisters. After all of these wives and all of these children, his father became a Catholic. I love that part. Why not? You know, hey, it's the time to do it. And so too did Anthony. His father was one of the top leaders in the Sudan People Liberation Army, and he was killed in action. In 1983, the family was scattered by war, and that was the last time, 28 years ago, that Anthony saw his mother. He was conscripted at the age of 11 as a child soldier. And by 13, he told me he was strong enough to carry a pack and an AK-47. He roamed Sudan for fully 16 years in a band of rebel soldiers till he finally escaped across the border, found a refugee camp, met an Italian Jesuit priest there, and was sent to do high school in the Cameroons. He then was sent by Catholic Relief Services to humanitarian and relief work in Goma, in Congo, filled with the refugee Hutus from Rwanda, where he saw more bloodshed than when he was a boy soldier at war in Sudan. He was declared a lost boy by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and was resettled in one of the 3 countries in the world which would take the lost boys of Sudan, the United States of America. For some reason, he was resettled as a political asylum from Sudan to South Dakota. This man did not have much luck in life. In South Dakota, he worked for 4 years in a plastic garbage bag factory, then in a meat packing company, and finally in a machinery assembly plant. And there Anthony began, for the very first time in his life, to drink. Anthony came to Seattle in order to go to Alaska to make money. He worked on a fishing boat for 3 months, landed back in Seattle, and squandered all that he had earned in a drinking spree in 15 days. Ashamed to go back to South Dakota, he lived homeless on our streets, sleeping under bridges, lining up for food at our shelters. He tells me, living on the streets of America was the hardest year of my life, worse even than being a boy soldier in Sudan. One night, a homeless, beer-drinking street pal of his jumped from an overpass in an attempt to commit suicide. Anthony doesn't know what happened to himself after that, only that he woke up the next day lying in his own blood and with a gash down the side of his face, which has left the scar, not, as it turns out, of Africa, but of Seattle. That was the last day he had a drink. It took a very long time and a long journey for Anthony to hit bottom. Because of friends like Greg Alex and Matt Talbot Center and Killian No and the Recovery Cafe and Jim Sinegal of Costco, though still alarmingly skinny and haunting in how he looks, Anthony has strived at Seattle University for the past 2 years and will graduate this year in public affairs. And he's recently become an American citizen and proudly brought me his certificate. He too wants to do a master's in not-for-profit leadership and to set up a foundation to start a sports camp back in Sudan on his grandfather's land so that boys there do not carry guns but have something else to do than what Anthony did. He says about this project and this purpose, everything, Father, has to start somewhere. I had not seen Anthony for a few months when he came to me in December to ask if he could stop out of school for 1 quarter so that he could go back during the time of the independence election in southern Sudan in order to go to his village there and to see his mother, whom he had not seen in 28 years and who is now blind. He told me that friends from a Catholic parish were getting him from Seattle to Toronto to Ankara to Khartoum, and I thought, great, he's not asking for money. But he then said he had to get from Khartoum to Juba and from Juba to Malakal and then to get up the Nile to his village to his mother, and he had to bring her a gift as well as gifts for his brothers and sisters, and remember there are 50 of them. I asked him, Anthony, how much are you asking for? He told me, I cut it in half, and I emailed my buddy Jim Sinegal to see if he would continue to support our Anthony. Jim called me back, and after some good cross-examination of this Jesuit priest that he usually gives me about whether Anthony was for real, he said yes, if Anthony worked at Costco after he got back, to pay Jim back part of the gift. Only then did I tell Jim that the gift that Anthony had to bring to his mother after all these years away was a cow. In Anthony's culture, the only gift from a son which counts for a mother is the gift of a cow. Jim said to me, okay, Father, but that's the first time I've been asked to buy a cow for someone. Here at Costco, we sell meat, we don't give away cows. I thought to myself, aren't people who say yes great? Now, when I prepared this talk, I was awaiting Anthony's return, interested to know how it turned out, whether he got to his home village and to his mother with the cow. Anthony did get back just recently and just barely. I talked with him last Friday. He's skinnier and he's more haunted than ever. Here's what happened. He got up the Nile to his home village bringing a small cow that was not yet milking. I think he economized because I cut in half the amount that he asked. His ailing blind mother was overjoyed to have him back. His clan slaughtered a bull to celebrate his return from America with a big feast. He said everything was destroyed in his village because of the wars, and he had to rebuild his mother's house, but everyone was very happy because of the election and the promise of independence. But 1 month ago today, on February the 9th, at 2:30 in the afternoon, just as Anthony was paying what he called the donkey man for porting water up from the river to the village, the donkey man was shot dead. And he was the first victim of a revenge attack upon that village by a militia general who had lost the election. In the attack on the village that afternoon, 270 people were killed, many of them recent refugees from the north of Sudan down to the south who were living in shelters by the river, many of whom were drowned fleeing for their lives. Anthony, the ex-soldier, knew how to keep his family in one place, to keep them seated on the ground unmoving, and none of them were killed. Although his mother wanted dearly to keep him there, she was the only one of his clan that did. Everyone else in his family insisted that he leave, that he return to America, finish his studies, start the foundation, and then come back to begin the sports camp. As you can imagine, our haunted, skinny Anthony, homeless on the streets of Seattle, now more haunted than ever, is the pride of his village, almost a savior from another world. And he sees the need for that sports camp because he saw now more than ever how the only thing children in his village know how to do is to carry guns. Now, Anthony is a remarkable face on the issues of our world today, isn't he? He's the face of southern Sudan. He's the face of child soldiers. He's the face of African violence. He's the face of African hopefulness. He's the face of political refugees in America. He's the face of Seattle homelessness, the face of alcoholism, the face of hunger for education, the face of hope when it is restored by very good people, and the face of faith, for that, says Anthony, is the only thing that has kept him alive. Now, when I look at Anthony, I'm amazed that any one person can endure that much, and it humbles me and helps me in my own life's troubles. And I see in his face that Africa will indeed come through, and that gives me hope. Doesn't looking at the face of Anthony confirm our commitment to service above self, but also service from what is deepest within ourselves? The final face is the face of immigration reform in America. I know Hernando, though that is not his real name, the best of these three, but then everyone knows Hernando. He's the life of the campus, the most extroverted and ebullient junior you could imagine, a student body officer, a resident hall assistant, and an undocumented college student. He wrote to me when he wanted to come to Seattle, might as well start at the top with the big softy, asking if we give financial aid to undocumented students. We do. I got him in touch with financial aid. He came. We fell in love with him. He not only comes to my office, but sometimes I think that I'm the one who's going to leave and he's going to take over my job. Hernando is one face of the immigration issue which we face in this country and which presses close all around us. He has a chubby face, short, wiry hair, red cheeks, a wild eye, and a bouncing body he fully owns. Hernando's not quiet or unconfident. Now, his father worked in America as a farm laborer and benefited from Reagan's amnesty, and he told his son back in their small village in Mexico that if he was tops in his class in that village, he would bring him north and he would show him snow. Hernando, of course, made sure he came out tops. His father tried every legal means and spent 30,000 pesos to try to bring his family to the United States, but failed. So Hernando, at the age of 11, and his younger brother came across the border hidden in the trailer of a semi-truck, and his mother hidden in the trailer of another. They ended up in the Seattle area where at first he fearfully went to school and found to his amazement that there were translators and there were programs to learn English. He learned English quickly, and by the time he was ready to go to high school, he was mainlined into Bellevue School District. Until the last week of his first year in high school, he never raised his hand in history class, though he loved history because of his betraying accent. Then he starred. He did advanced placement courses, got an international bachelor's degree. He was bright, and he was going to college. He was so bright that he tackled the problem of how to get the 32 Latino classmates of his in his senior class also to graduate and to go to college. For in his school, 76% of Latinos were dropping out, getting pregnant, joining gangs, or just giving up. And he was going to get them into college. He went to Superintendent Mike Riley, who gave him his blessing. He says, if you can do anything, you're doing better than me. Of his own initiative, he found lawyers, and then he got signed parental consent so that he got access to all of the transcripts, all of the report cards of his 32 Latino classmates. Each week, he met with each of them, usually in groups of 5, depending on the academic problems they had, which classes they had to take to go to college, what exams to take to graduate, what attendance you had to maintain, how to do better in a failing course, how to apply to college. Above all, why was it worth it? Hernando figured out the system, and he applied it personally to those Latino students week by week. None escaped Hernando's attention. Nobody does. But that was not enough. Once a month, until 3 o'clock in the morning, he stayed up, typing a personal letter in Spanish to the parents of each student, convincing them of college and getting their support for their child. It worked. 27 of those 32 Latino students graduated from high school and went on to college. Hernando got accepted at UW, WSU, Gonzaga, Whitman, and Seattle U. And for kicks, he told me, he decided to apply to Harvard and Princeton just so that he could receive a polite rejection letter on their fancy stationery and keep it as a souvenir. He got it in due time. He's studying political affairs, public affairs, political science, international business, besides running Seattle U. And he'd like to become a politician at the local level of government, a council member, a mayor, take your pick, Bellevue or Seattle, or, and this is what I hope, superintendent of public education. The hurdle, of course, is that when Hernando graduates, he'll not be able to get a job because he cannot get a Social Security number. That's what brought him to my office. Together we fought for the passage of the National Dream Act, which would allow students like Hernando or soldiers in our military services who came to the U.S. as children and went through our schools a qualification for work and a pathway to citizenship. It is, of course, a very small part of immigration reform. I got busy, got informed, wrote and published an op-ed in the Los Angeles Times on Hernando and the DREAM Act. It passed the House of Representatives in November, and it got a vote of 55 to 41 in the United States Senate. But that, folks, is 5 votes short of what it takes for success in the United States Senate. Senator Patty Murray bowed her head and told me that the galleries of the United States Senate were packed with hopeful Latino students when those 55 senators said yes to them and to their futures and to their contributions to America, but that they were crestfallen when that was not enough in our system. How could we not support these kids as our best future citizens and the best friends of our own, less involved in America kids? Immigration reform has to start somewhere, as Anthony said about his project in Africa. I'd say a great place to start would be for our country to say yes to Hernando and to those 27 Latino classmates he knew how to get into college. He graduates a year from this June. There is still time. When I put his face on this problem, I'm clear what I should do about it. You see, it's not about 11 million people in America. It's about Hernando. No matter what we do for this brilliant kid who wanted to see snow, his face will always show gratitude, joy, and hope to make his dream come true. So there you have it. 3 faces on 3 world's problems. Khaled, the face of trauma in Palestine, Anthony, the face of Africa, and Hernando, the face of undocumented Latino college students. They happen to be 3 men. I could as well have had you see the face of veiled Hajar, who has figured out how her Islamic religion should create secular states for the sake of religious tolerance, both for the sake of Islam's truth and its principles. Or I could have talked about Rebecca, who is learning how to reteach trust to abused and neglected little children. Or Katie from Wasilla, Alaska, who, though she can't see Russia from her backyard, Katie from Wasilla, Alaska, is the best and most powerful of what our women college students are becoming as they begin to take over America from us. I end by asking myself and you 2 questions as we recommit ourselves to service above self and service from what is deepest in ourselves. Should we really dare to address any world problem until we have put a face on that issue, a face which engages our hearts and calls for and makes possible a fuller human response from us? And secondly, what are the problems all around us in the world that choose us, in our country or our city, the ones that have walked in our doors, which are not problems but people? They have faces, they have chosen us, and they have power to get us to say yes to them and to see where that little yes takes us and them. Thank you, my colleagues, for the kind of committed and compassionate colleagues you are, and for the privilege of bringing my world to you. Thank you very much.
We do have time for a couple of questions if people have a question that they'd like to ask Father Steve. I see a hand up over here.
Thank you, Father. That was wonderful stories. I'm Carolyn Hodgeboom, an SU graduate of the Master in Not-for-Profit Leadership.
Love you. I'm going to check you on our alumni list. Yeah.
I'm a member. I'm part of your leadership team.
Great. Thank you.
All right. My question is, I know that SU has kicked off a youth initiative. Can you just touch a little bit on that? Because your stories were wonderful, but this is something that's going to affect the
Sure.
immediate community around SU.
Thank you very much. We were able to announce 2 weeks ago what's known as the Seattle University Youth Initiative that we've been planning and developing and working with our neighbors and agencies for the last 3 years. It's an engagement of our entire university, all 8 colleges and schools, 8,000 students, our faculty and staff, with a 100-square block immediately to the south and east of Seattle University. That area has 3 schools within it, Bailey Gatzert School, Washington Middle School, and Garfield, and we plan on creating a pipeline of success for all of the kids of those schools. Bailey Gatzert has the highest poverty of any elementary school in the city of Seattle. So it's a long-term, open-ended commitment of partnership of Seattle University with that entire district, not just in education, but also with help from our nurses, our lawyers, our business people, our church leaders, our social workers, our psychologists, and in total partnership and engagement with that neighborhood. It's called the Seattle University Youth Initiative. It's the next step in fulfilling our mission. Thanks.
One quick question. Any questions? Well, all right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health,